Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Todd Klindt's SharePoint Netcast number, drumroll please, 199, recorded live on Monday, May 5th, just like the sign says, 2014. I am your host and CTU secret agent, Todd Klindt. And when I'm not out fighting crime and saving the world from terrorists, I'm a lowly SharePoint administrator at Rackspace.com. Principal architect, that is my fake title that I use. And so to help them recoup the costs of my dead weight on the salary roll there, go ahead and go out to SharePoint.Rackspace.com and you can find out all the great SharePoint things that we do. We've got links to netcasts and white papers and stuff like that. And when we go to conferences, we put all of our collateral and stuff up there. You can't go wrong. Go ahead and make SharePoint.Rackspace.com your homepage, and then just every day when the new stuff comes up, you will know for sure. That's SharePoint.Rackspace.com. I just touched something wrong on there. Let's go ahead. Tonight, for those of you who are listening to the recording, you didn't get a chance to experience all the technical difficulties that I had earlier, but those of you in the chat room, just know that anything I touch today is just exploding into smoke. So I'm afraid to touch anything right now. Speaking of, though, for production notes, everything's going pretty well. The last couple Netcasts I've noticed, 198 for sure and 197 also, have audio video sync issues. As the Netcast drones on, the video falls farther and farther behind the audio. That is something that's being introduced by the rendering process. I verified that the source file does not have that, and I verified that in Camtasia, as I jump around and put the lower thirds in and all that kind of stuff, it doesn't have it either. And so it's something that's happening when I'm rendering the product out. I've opened up a support ticket with TechSmith. They are on it. They got back to me in like an hour, and they got some things they want me to try. So I'll probably try those tomorrow. But for now, just know that the last couple are that way, and I'm not going to re-render them once I get it fixed, because that's just a bunch of work. You guys probably don't look at me enough for that to matter anyway. But I am on it. I'm looking into it. Also, this week I've got the 3 lights going on again tonight, and that's been going pretty well. Still kind of tweaking that a little bit. It doesn't help that I've got 2 different cameras here, and for whatever reason, I'm much darker in one than the other. So I was looking at one and cranking all the lights up, and I looked at the other, and I was like, "Oh my God, the glare off my forehead, it's horrible." So to me, it feels like they're too bright, but we'll see what the video looks like. But as always, with the lights and the audio and all the improvements that I've made to this glorious mess over the last 199 episodes, many of those have been because you, the listener, the viewer, the long-suffering folks that have been paying attention to this thing, because you guys suggested things, and that's what makes this better. So if you've got suggestions about lights, video, topics, whatever, anything short of getting a new host, which I've put in for at Rackspace, they won't pay for that, go ahead and shoot me a line. You can email me at todd.klint@rackspace.com, or hit me up on Twitter at Todd Klindt, and give me all your suggestions. Can't promise I'm going to take you up on every one of them, but it's always good stuff. Now on to the topics. We have a fun, eclectic show tonight. We've got stuff all over the board. The first thing, and kind of a weird thing that came out this weekend, somebody tweeted me at one of my secret accounts. Now, I know a lot of you folks out there have this. You have your main Twitter account. I do. Mine is at Todd Klindt. And then you have secret Twitter accounts, little clandestine things that you only use to go cause mayhem and mischief. Well, I have a couple of those as well myself. And 2 of them are at SP2010 patches and at SP2013 patches. And that's where I tweet out information about the SharePoint patches that come out. And that way, if somebody doesn't want to follow my Twitter stream and find out what I had for breakfast, or what crazy funny stuff my cat's doing, or what I stubbed my toe on last, but they just want to know about patches, then they can follow one of those other 2 Twitter streams and only get that information. So over the weekend, somebody tweeted me and asked about why there were 2 different ISOs for SharePoint 2010 with SP2. And I got to looking at it, and what happened was on the 1st of May, Microsoft released a second version of the SharePoint 2010 SP2 ISO on MSDN or on volume license, and it adds some tweaks that allow you to install SharePoint 2010 on Windows Server 2012 R2, the newest of the Windows Server 2012s. So SharePoint supported Windows Server 2012 R2 a while back, but they just kind of finally baked this into the ISO. I'm guessing they made some changes to the prereq installer. I know that's what they did with SharePoint 2013, but now there's a new version of that ISO out there, and that's what this tweet was about. And I apologize to the person who tweeted me. I've forgotten who you are, and I didn't. Craig somebody, I think. I forget. So they updated that, so I started doing some research on that. They updated that ISO, and now if you want to install on Windows Server 2012, you can, or you can install it on your old one. But they did a couple of interesting things, for good or for bad. One of them was previously, if you looked at the knowledge base article that talked about Windows Server 2012 R2 support in Windows SharePoint 2010, there are way too many product versions and names for me to keep track. Before, you only needed SP2 to be supported on that OS. Now they're saying that you need SP2 plus the February 2014 cumulative update to be supported. So it looks like they moved that support goalpost a little bit. So if you are installing on Windows Server 2012 R2, install with this new fancy ISO, and then either slipstream in that February patch into there, or install it right away before you add it to your farm or anything like that. A couple of notes that they have in various knowledge base articles and stuff. SharePoint 2010 does not support you upgrading the OS, so you can't upgrade Windows Server 2012 to 2012 R2 or 2008 R2 to 2012 and 2012 R2. You have to install a fresh one for that. And Doug in the chat room, who is affectionately known as the SharePoint Doughboy, he said that Craig Humphrey was the one that tweeted that to SP 2010 patches. So thanks to Craig for drawing my attention to that. So you can't upgrade the OS. So if you have an existing farm with existing servers that are not Windows 2012 R2, you can't upgrade them and do this patch and all that. You have to install them new. Now that seems like a lot of work, and it's kind of more work than it needs to be. But fortunately, there is kind of a way around that. We all know you can add and remove servers from your farm willy-nilly, however you want to scale it up, scale it down, whatever. So what you can do is install new Windows 2012 R2 servers with this new ISO, put the February patch on, get it all patched up, and get it to the same patch level as your farm, and then add it to your existing farm. So that's all supported. Now, and this is all, I should have mentioned this earlier, this is all in a blog post that I wrote. You can go to www.toddklindt.com/SP2010 SP2 new ISO. All one word, all lowercase, all whatever, all in Comic Sans, all that. So you can add that to your farm and then, rotate out other servers, because your farm really exists in SQL. It's exposed on SharePoint servers, but the heart of it is really that config database in SQL. So as long as you leave that alone, you're fine. So once you add that server to your farm, if you've got any non-SharePoint tweaks that you made, like if you edited any of your web configs, and we'll talk about that a little later in the show, if you've added any certificates in IIS or made any changes there, you'll have to do all those to that new server. But you can slowly start rotating out your non-Windows 2012 R2 servers for new ones. And then in the blink of an eye, you will have a farm that is 2010, SharePoint 2010, Windows 2012 R2 all the way around. So again, I've got the blog post out there. It's got all the links and all the stuff that I just made you listen through. Go out there, let me know if you try it and how it works and all that. But it looks like that's been updated, and that's pretty cool that they're adding that support to SharePoint 2010. I don't know what you guys have seen. For me, being a SharePoint guy forever now, SharePoint 2007 was kind of where SharePoint got popular. So SharePoint 2007 didn't get adopted really fast, but when 2010 came out, it was like those mob scenes from Black Friday at Walmart, people crawling all over each other and throwing elbows and all that, trying to get SharePoint 2010 installed, and it worked pretty well. Then SharePoint 2013 came out, and it hasn't been quite as fast of adoption because of the cloud initiatives and because SharePoint 2010 is pretty good. So this is an interesting testament to how much support and all that Microsoft is still giving SharePoint 2010. Lori Gowan asks a good question in the chat room. She says, how does that affect PowerShell, or really the SharePoint management shell, if you put it on Windows 2012 R2? So this is something I don't touch on in the blog post, but I think one of the links covers it. I think it's the official support link. SharePoint 2010 only supports PowerShell v2. And Windows Server 2012 and Windows Server 2012 R2 both come with PowerShell v3. And what we will find out is if you try to run the SharePoint 2010 management console with PowerShell v3, it will fail and you get all kinds of red text and it'll be horrible and you can't do anything fun in PowerShell because you can't do anything, and that's just very sad. So what you need to do is you need to go in and tweak the startup for the management shell, and you can give PowerShell a parameter, and off the top of my head I don't remember what it is, but it's like -v2, and then it fires PowerShell v3 up, but in PowerShell v2 mode, and then all the SharePoint 2010 stuff will work. So you do need to tweak that a little bit, but I'm pretty sure that is referenced in one of these links somewhere, because that was a pretty common thing when this all came out. Oh, yep, it sure is. Oh, but they don't have the solution for it. That's hysterical. Yeah, so that's the solution. Yeah, so TechRev Merrill in the chat room has got it, PowerShell-v2.0, and that will fix everything back up for you. You don't want to lose PowerShell. Holy cow, that'd be sad. So this will be interesting. We've got a bunch of customers that are still on SharePoint 2010, so it'll be interesting to see what they think about all this. And good timing. Shout out to Vern Anderson in the chat room. He's one of my fellow Rackspace cohorts, and he's also a big PowerShell guy. So if you guys have PowerShell questions in the chat room, bounce them off Vern. Can't stump him. Can't be done. So all that, but again, I would like to know how people's experiences are with this new ISO, installing on Windows Server 2012, all that. With Tech Ed coming up next week, I'm not probably going to have time to play with that this week. Okay, on to our next topic. This is a topic that has come up a lot, and it's been a problem since, well, SharePoint 2007 at least, and even talked about it a little bit at our SP TechCon upgrade session or something, but this idea of some of the problems that you have when you have SharePoint servers that don't have outbound access to the internet. And what happens, there's a couple of things that show up, but you're going to end up seeing some weird symptoms, like things take a long time to start up, things like that. PowerShell even, our beloved PowerShell has that same problem. And the reason for this is because your SharePoint servers, for a whole variety of reasons, and the list of things that do this is as long as my arm, but they will go out to http://crl.microsoft.com, and CRL is an initialism for Certificate Revocation List. And so essentially there's a bunch of things inside of SharePoint that use certificates, and with any certificate, with the certificate structure that we've got with SSL and all that, there's a facility in place for revoking certificates in case they get issued wrong or somebody hijacks them or whatever. And so things that read certificates will periodically go out to the CRL sites, and in this case, crl.microsoft.com, to see if all these certificates that SharePoint has have been revoked or if they're good or not. And if your box doesn't have access to the internet, it can't read that, and it times out. It tries to go and go and go, and it can add like 15 seconds to a whole bunch of stuff. And this impacts SharePoint 2007, SharePoint 2010, and SharePoint 2013. So the reason I like this, I saw this blog post come up. It was posted on May 1st by Christopher Hahn. Looks like he's maybe a Microsoft guy, not sure. Yeah, he's a Microsoft guy. And so what he has done is he has put all of the different approaches to how to handle this together in one blog post and kind of explained what each one of them does and how it works and all that kind of stuff. I'm not going to read through the entire list, though it is a very good list, but he had a couple of them that I did want to comment on. So this is a good one if you've got any SharePoint servers who don't have direct access to the internet. If you go to a SharePoint server, you open up Internet Explorer and you try to go to my blog, if it doesn't work, well, number one, that's just sad, so weep openly because of that. But number two, if that happens, then you probably should read this because it probably pertains to you. But so a couple of the options that he talks about is, the first one is, this is done normally for security purposes. So even if people from the internet can get into your SharePoint box, perhaps your SharePoint box can't get out to the internet, as a protection against malicious processes, things like the like the Target hack that happened. If boxes can't get out to the internet, then there's less stuff that can get done. They can't go out and talk to bot servers and find out what jobs to do. They can't publish out sensitive information, things like that. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. But one option is to change your firewall to permit that specific traffic, so traffic for crl.microsoft.com, from your SharePoint servers. And Christopher does a great job in this blog post of explaining, how to do that, and then he even has some links to like knowledge base articles and things like that explain why this is important, how it's preferred, all that kind of stuff that you can actually take to your network guys and say, here's what's happening. It's a security thing that's happening. Here are the reasons why I need to do it. So that's a pretty good one. So the first thing you should try to do is see if you can get your firewall guys to just allow that traffic out only to crl.microsoft.com. And even farther down in his blog post, he actually shows you the individual URLs. So if they want to block it down to that level, they could. And there's like 4 URLs that you need out. But that's the best one that you can do. I personally have had almost no luck with that. When I've talked to customers who have had this, that are in highly secure environments, I offer that solution, and they point at me and laugh and then throw chairs at me. They never do that. But that's the one you should try first. Tech Rev Merrill in the chat room says he may be the only company who's able to do that. You might be the only one. You might be the only one in existence. So the second option is to, on all of your SharePoint servers, point in the host file or whatever, point crl.microsoft.com to 127.0.0. 127.0.0.1, which is essentially the loopback address. And what that does is that allows the connection to go out, and it can connect to the machine, but it will just get a 404 on that file. So it won't keep trying to connect. It will connect immediately, but then fail out because the files that it's looking for don't exist. I'll be honest, that is the way that I normally handle this. So after I go for option number 1 and get laughed at by the security guys because Microsoft is bad and blah, blah, then I go with option number 2, and then everything just works. So not a great option, and we're going to talk later about a couple of better options, but that is one option that you can do. Is just point them all to null so those connections don't time out all the way. The third option that he talks about, I've seen a couple places do, but man, is it a gigantic pain. And that is, and for those of you in the chat room following along with this URL, this is option number 3. And this is set generate publisher evidence to false in a .config file. And that's important, not a specific file, but in a .config file. So this is all, this whole certificate revocation stuff is part of the .NET framework. And so you can go out to the .config files for all of your different .NET things that are happening, and you can set this generate publisher evidence to false, and that will keep it from looking at that CRL list. Now the problem with this is you're going to have to change it in about 40 places. Okay, that's an exaggeration, probably 10 or 12. But you're going to have to do it on every one of your servers in a whole bunch of spots. You're going to have to do it in web config files and OWS timer.exe config files and just all kinds of stuff. It's a really painful thing. And Christopher did put a link to a bunch of them in there, and I guess there really is about 20 of them. So there's a lot of them, and it's just a lot of work. Every single time you do, add a new server or add a new web app or whatever, you're going to do this, and it's just not very feasible. But I have had to do that a couple of times for customers, and it is kind of a pain. So Doug counted them out. I can just imagine there's fingerprints on his monitor. He says there's 17 web configs, and it's pretty painful. So that's another option. So he also covered a couple other options that I have not done myself, but I like the look of. So for those of you who are following along, this is option number 4. And one of the things that happens is the SharePoint servers check each other. So a lot of inter server communication happens, and it happens with certificates and things like that. But one of the things that doesn't happen is the farm certificate doesn't get copied to all the boxes. And so if you can't get out to the internet, can't do those things, they end up trying to check themselves, and it doesn't work. So you can put this certificate on all of your servers, and that will speed those communications up. And that's a pretty good idea. Like he says in the blog post, I have no idea why this doesn't happen out of the box when the server is joined to the farm, why it doesn't get that certificate. But that's one to do. Probably everybody should do that. So another one, and this is probably the most ingenious of all, and I kind of want to try this out just to see how it works. And this is, and for those of you following along, I skipped a couple. I'm on option number 7 now. And this is to go out and manually download the 5 CRL files that SharePoint is trying to get, and then open up a server inside of your firewall that answers to crl.microsoft.com. So it can be an open web app or IIS site, or one that has a host header for crl.microsoft.com. Create the path /PKI/CRL/products and just copy those 5 files in, and then with your own DNS or however, or with host files, point your servers there instead. So then you get the benefit of having all the CRL information, so potentially not, loading revoked certificates and all that, but with all the protections of your servers not getting out to the internet. Now, he does mention that there is one downside to this, and it is that those CRL files expire in about 2 months. So you're going to have to do this periodically. It's kind of a pain, but like he mentions in here, it would be super easy to script. And I've got a couple of blog posts about using invoke web request in PowerShell that you could very easily do 5 invoke web requests that would dump those files into that directory, and then they would always be updated. Just do it once a month, whatever. So that's good stuff there. So this blog post is outstanding because it just covers all of the different options out there, and he covers a bunch that I didn't talk about because he really gets into the weeds. There are 8 options altogether. So Doug brings up an interesting point that all of these options are circumventing the purpose of the certificate revocation list. I would say to a large degree the last one does not. So option 7 does not, because we're actually pulling the CRL list from Microsoft from a machine that can get out, and then putting it in. But I agree that it does seem to contradict the spirit of the CRL. But if you've got somebody who won't let you out, you got to do what you got to do. But the other thing is, if you've got a server that doesn't have internet access, I would guess that you probably are at a reduced risk for the kind of things that this would prevent. But I'm going to get what you're saying. The best option is option number 1, to let the traffic out, or option number 5, where you manually download the CRL files. So that's good stuff. But like I said, this comes up all the time. I've had this happen. Happens 3 or 4 times a year. So that was good stuff. Okay, so this is another one, and this one kind of close to my heart, and it is a blog post that Bill Bear published, and I think he published it a while back, but I'm kind of getting ready for Tech Ed, so I was reading some stuff. And this is a blog post on what your options are for setting up OneDrive for Business now that SharePoint 2013 with Service Pack 1 supports moving your My Sites up into OneDrive for Business. And I'm not going to go through the whole thing because there's just a lot of options. It's a really long blog post, and you should give Bill's blog some link love. I emailed Bill a while back. Let's see if he did it. Oh, he did not. Oh, that stinker. he was going to take Shane's blog off of his blog and put mine on instead. Oh, that big meanie. But it's all the options for getting... Well, he didn't do it. That stinker. All the options for getting authentication set up between your on-premises farm and Office 365 so that you can move your things up. And he talks about each of the different versions, what the pros and the cons are and all that kind of stuff, and shows you how to get it set up. So it's a really good resource if you're thinking about doing the whole OneDrive for Business and pulling some of that content out of your on-premises farm and up into Office 365. I'm going to be doing a session on that at TechEd. I know a few of you in the chat room are going to be at TechEd. I think Jared said he was going to be. I'm going to be doing that session on Tuesday, so this was part of my research for that. But we've been hearing for a while about how hybrid environments are kind of the wave of the future. I think Microsoft has realized that people aren't going to go completely into the cloud. Not everybody can go completely into the cloud. And so... into the cloud. So this hybrid thing is kind of the next way that it's going to go. And this is one of the ways I think we're going to be seeing more options for moving stuff from on-premises, little bits and pieces up into the cloud. I think this is one of the first examples. So it's a good read, even if you're not going to do it, just kind of see what the options are going to be going forward. So I liked that one. Yeah. Yes, go into the cloud, the cloud, however. I was looking at you guys, the motley crowd over there. So I like that one. Thanks to Bill for that. And Bill was supposed to take, if you look on his blog on the right-hand side, he's got a bunch of links to bloggers. He was supposed to take Shane's link out and put a link to my blog in there. I emailed him. He said he was going to do it. I didn't check up on him. I trusted him. He's got an honest face, very boyish in his good looks, but it turns out he must have fibbed to me. All right, so the last topic for the night is a good one. We all know we got the new Windows phones with 8.1. We got a bunch of people in the chat room that have the 1520s. I know that Jared and Joanne do. Lori and myself, we have 920s. It's the Windows 8.1, Windows Phone 8.1 has been a really good OS upgrade. And Windows WP Central has been having a lot of great articles about that. I haven't talked about all of them because there's just been too many. But one showed up this last week that I wanted to talk about, and that is how to set up backups on your Windows Phone 8.1. So it's built into the OS now, and you can go in and set backups on different things. It backs it all up to OneDrive for you. And it's also how if you've got multiple phones on your account, like I've got a 920 and then I've got a 520 that I use as a burner for all of my drug deals and things like that, conversations with unsavory folks. But this is also that same kind of thing, not the backup specifically, but the same idea that it's moving settings into OneDrive and then pulling them down. And that's what this backup will do. So you can go in and there are 3 different areas you can set to have backed up, and you can tell it when to back it up, whether it should use your Wi-Fi or your data connection or not. But it's in there. I would recommend that everybody turn it on. If you don't turn it on, your phone will yell at you and remind you. But it's things like passwords. One of the cool things that it does now with Windows Phone 8.1 is it will sync up Wi-Fi passwords, which is pretty cool. So if you've got, like I've got a Windows 8.1, well, I got 2 Windows 8.1 tablets and a Windows Phone 8.1. If I go any place and connect to a wireless, like my in-laws, for instance, put in my Wi-Fi key, the next time I connect any of those devices to the internet, it will sync that up, and then the next time I take any of those devices to my in-laws, it will sync up. So that's pretty cool. It'll automatically jump on the Wi-Fi. You won't need to remember that. If you play games and things like that, one of the things it can back up is your scores and your levels and all that kind of stuff, if your app was written to do that. So free backup, no good reason not to use it, and it does it on its own, or you can go in there and tell it to do it itself, but it's in settings, backups. So that was a good one. Again, WP Central has had a lot of great tips for Windows Phone 8.1. They've also got some forums out there. If you go to wpcentral.com, up at the top, there's forums. There's forums by phone, by OS, things like that. Really, really great stuff out there. Highly recommend that. I go out there all the time. Follow them on Twitter, all that kind of stuff. All right, so that is it for the topics. It was a short week. I was busy with some other stuff, so we only got 4 topics, but I got a lot of shameless self-promoting to do. So let's dig into that. So the first thing is, a week from today, I will be at TechEd in Houston, where it's going to be in the 80s, and I think that is both the temperature and the humidity next week. But I will be there I get there Saturday night, and then Sunday, Shane and I are doing a pre-conference session on installing and configuring SharePoint 2013. And then I will be there, so that's Sunday. Monday, I'm going to be a couple places. I'm going to be at the PowerShell booth in the morning, and then the SharePoint booth sometime in the afternoon, and then I'll be at the Expo Hall for the Ask the Experts or whatever thing that will be there. And then Tuesday, I'm going to be at the SharePoint booth again in the morning, and then doing the OneDrive for Business configuration and installation session Tuesday afternoon. So check all that out. I plan on doing a blog post. I was going to do it today on my TechEd schedule. Again, I know a bunch of the folks in the chat room. Well, a couple of them are going to be at TechEd. So by all means, come up and say, hey, I probably won't help but be able to run into you. Very generously, Teresa Wilson, the scripting wife, blogged last week about if she could actually go to sessions, she would, these are the sessions that she would go to, and she put my session in there. So she's very generous. I don't think she would enjoy much of the stuff I talk about, but she's very nice. And then I will be at their booth on Monday, and she published that schedule too. I will put that in the notes, put it in the chat room, and that's just to hang out, talk about how great PowerShell is, all that stuff. So I'll be there again. Rackspace doesn't have a booth, I don't believe, or if they do, I'm not working at it. But if you're at TechEd and you want to come up and say, hey, I would love you to do it. I'm a really friendly guy. Ask anybody who's met me at conferences. Just come up and say, hey, this is really weird. I know you don't know me. I'm not a creeper or whatever the kids call them these days. I listen to the Netcast. And that's all it'll take. You have no reason to feel embarrassed or anything like that. But I would love you to come up and say, hey, let me know if you listen to the Netcast, read my blog, whatever. And I'll probably, if you do that, though, be prepared. I will ask you what I can do to make it better. So have some ideas for me about that. But otherwise, coming up, I'll be at the SharePoint booth a bunch. And I guess they're going to have different stations there. I don't know which stations I'm going to be working at. But I'll be there, PowerShell, all that kind of stuff. But please come up and say, hey. And that is TechEd next week in Houston. And I probably will not do a Netcast next week because Monday night there's a bunch of stuff going on, and and doing it on the road is just very difficult because I don't have all the equipment. Tried it a couple, last week or whatever, and it was very tough. So Jack in the chat room mentions that, yeah, if you come meet me, you can bring me things for my Netcast as well. So Jack is the guy solely responsible for the lights here, the lighting and all that kind of stuff. Lori helped me get the curtain set up well with the pleats and all that kind of stuff. And then Jack thrust upon me the lights that I'm using to kind of light that up and give it that contrast. In Jack's credit, he'd been talking to me about getting lights for this and doing this thing for probably 2 years. And he would send me links to lights, and we would get on Skype and we would talk about lights, and he would have me convinced, but I would just be afraid to do it, afraid to spend the money, afraid to set it up. So Jack was at the SharePoint conference, and he actually brought the lights. And he's like, here are the lights that I've been telling you to buy. Take them home and set them up. And so without his pushing and prodding, we wouldn't have this. I think the lights add a whole lot to it. It gives it some depth. So it was all good. So if you're in the chat room, thank Jack, and he's on Twitter at SharePoint Jack. So send him a thank you if you like all that. Teresa in the chat room, SharePoint Madam, is saying that the Houston SharePoint user group is meeting the Wednesday night of TechEd, May 14th, at the Microsoft office. And so if you're at TechEd, you should swing by there and say hey. Teresa, I don't know what my plans are Wednesday night, but I may swing by. Remind me after this is over. I'll put it in my calendar because I don't have Outlook or anything on here. And Jared, you do make a good joke that it took a lot of work to add some depth to something to anything that I've done. Jack has added the depth. And thanks to Jack's prodding, I did end up buying a couple of other lights. So he sent 2 home with me, 2 different types. Played with them a little bit. I now have 3 going there. I have one here that's kind of shining off there. I've got one behind me that's lighting up behind me. And then I've got one over there that's kind of lighting over there. But that was the push that I needed. Jack sent the lights with me and all that. And I kind of got to play with them and see how they work. So appreciate his help for that. All right, so after Tech Ed, I'm taking a month or so off. Don't have any work travel planned for June. That's a good deal. In July, though, I'm making up for it. July 15th and 16th, I will be at the Australian Sharing the Point conference in Sydney. And I don't see any of our Australian friends into there, at least not that I remember. So I'll be doing that. I'll be doing the PowerShell with SharePoint Online and the Visual Studio load testing. And then the next week in New Zealand, on the 22nd, 23rd, I'll be doing the same sessions over in Auckland. So we're very excited for that. And so if you're in there, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, if you're going to be at those conferences, like I said with TechEd, come over, introduce yourself, shake my hand, tell me how bad my Netcast is. I'd love to talk to you. I'd love to meet new people all the time. So by all means, do that. And then there are a couple of other conferences later in the year that I'm trying to worm my way into. And as we get some information on that, I will let you know. But getting close on a couple of those, so I'll let you know. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for the patience in the chat room. I had to reboot every machine in this house twice. I think to get everything working tonight. You guys were patient like saints in there. I appreciate that. So again, next week, I think you guys get the week off. Watch one of my old Netcasts as a rerun because I will be at Tech Ed and just exhausted from working in the booths all day and all that. So I probably will not do a session there. If I think about it, I'll take my video camera and maybe record some little one-off interviews with people, talk to them. But there will not be a live Netcast next week. So thanks, everybody. Happy Cinco de Mayo to all the folks that celebrate that. It was a fun day today. Got a couple little kids, and they were learning about Cinco de Mayo in school, so we had to have Mexican food for supper and all that. But wanted to shout that out as well. So thanks, everybody. Chat room, stick around. I'll be in there for a while hanging out with you guys. But thanks, everybody, and I will see you in 2 weeks for big Netcast number 200 in 2 weeks. Talk to you later. Have a good night.